If you're waiting for a new Mac Pro, well, keep waiting, but Apple does have a brand new desktop line. It's called the Mac Studio, and they even threw in the new Mac display we've all been waiting for. At the latest Apple event, sure, there was a new iPhone, but the most interesting stuff was really the new Mac Studio desktop and the new Mac Studio display. The Mac Studio desktop is like a more expensive version of the Mac Mini, while the display is like a less expensive version of Apple's famous XDR display. Underpinning the new Mac Studio is a brand new chip. It's the M1 Ultra. That follows the M1, the M1 Pro, the M1 Max. The Ultra is basically two M1 Max chips kind of stuck together. That M1 Ultra, it offers up to 20 CPU cores, up to 64 GPU cores. Apple says the new M1 Ultra is 8 times faster than the original M1, which came out at the end of 2020. So what is the Mac Studio? It basically looks like two Mac Minis stacked on top of each other. Apple says it's 7.7 inches square and 3.7 inches tall. A lot of that, frankly, inside is cooling. There's some big fans in there. The Mac Studio, it's definitely aimed at content creators, video producers, 3D modelers, maybe the kind of people who ran out last year and at least thought about getting one of the new 14-inch or 16-inch MacBook Pros with either the M1 Pro or the M1 Max chips in them. Obviously, the big hook there is you get a lot more graphics processing power than you did in the original M1 or, frankly, in just about any old Intel-powered Mac. So the Mac Studio, it's going to be available with the M1 Max or with the M1 Ultra, and you can upgrade the storage to up to 8 terabytes. You put all that together and it's not going to be cheap. One of the things that really jumped out to me about the Mac Studio is that it has a lot of connections. Mac systems have really moved in the opposite direction for many years, down to just 1 or 2 or 4 USB-C Thunderbolt ports, where here you have a bunch of connections on the front and a bunch of connections on the back. I really like seeing some of the connections come back to the front, where frankly they're a lot easier to use. On the back, you've got 4 USB-C Thunderbolt ports, you got Ethernet, you got 2 USB-A ports, you got HDMI, you got a headphone jack. Yes, Apple still believes in headphone jacks for some products. On the front, you've got 2 more USB-C ports on the M1 Max. That's all they are. On the M1 Ultra version, they're also Thunderbolt ports. I don't know why you can't have that for both, but that's the way it is. Now, if all this sounds like it's going to be very expensive, well, it is. The Mac Mini is still $699. The Mac Studio starts at $1999 for the M1 Max version and $39.99 for the M1 Ultra version. I went through that M1 Ultra version and I just added all the high-end add-ons I could, including that 8 terabytes of storage, and I got up to $8,000. So whether or not you're interested in getting the Mac Studio, you might be interested in getting the Mac Studio display. That, of course, works well with the Mac Studio, I'm sure, but would also work with a Mac Mini or as an extra display for your MacBook, or maybe you have an old Mac Pro sitting around. This is the display a lot of people have been waiting for, because Apple really has only had that super expensive XDR display for a long time now. If you wanted something different, Apple actually pushed you towards LG and some other displays. Now they have their own, and it's called the Mac Studio display. It's a 27-inch 5K display, kind of reminds me a little bit of the display in the 27-inch iMac. And it has, this is the really new and interesting part, it has an A13 chip inside. Now, why would you want to have a chip inside your display? Well, it's got a 12-megapixel camera built in right in the front, very similar to what you'd find on an iPad. And having that A13 chip inside lets you have center stage work for that display, and that's the iPad feature where the camera can kind of smartly follow you around the room, and it can also do spatial audio. And the fact that the processing is built into the display for those means it'll work no matter what Mac you hook up to it. And of course, the Mac Studio display also has some ports. They're on the back this time. You got 3 USB-C and you have 1 USB-C Thunderbolt. And just like the classic Mac displays of old, you can actually use that last port to charge your MacBook. Just send the power down a USB-C cable and you can charge up even your MacBook Pro from it. Now, the display actually has a couple of different options. There's a standard stand that does like a 30-degree tilt. There's a tilt and height adjustable stand, and there's also, a wall mount you can get. And depending on how you configure it, the price is going to change, and whether or not you add the micro texture coating to it, which is a good anti-reflective glare coating that I've seen on the XDR display, and it's very nice, also costs extra. The base price for the Mac Studio display is $15.99, and that's with the tilt stand. If you add the height adjustable stand that also tilts, then you're up to $19.99, and then for any of those options, you can add the anti-reflective etched coating. So the max you'll pay for an Apple Studio display, if you get the most expensive type of stand and that micro-etched coating on the screen, is $22.99, which sounds expensive until you remember that Apple sells a $1,000 stand, just the stand itself, for that XDR. Both the Mac Studio and the Mac Studio Display are available to order now, and they go on sale on March 18th.